So thank you all for joining. Okay, so I am showing 2:59, so I'm going to give another minute or so for my moderator to let folks in. So I know quite a few of you in this list. So I'll do a short introduction just when everyone is in and after we get started. So yeah. All right, so I am showing 3 o'clock and I know we only have 15 minutes. 15 minutes, excuse me. So I will go ahead and get started. And if my moderator, feel free to let folks come in as they would like. So I'll go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jennifer Maxwell, and I'm the coordinator of instructional design and compliance at Community College of Denver. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to make foreign language courses more accessible from an HTML standpoint. So that's going to be the gist of this. It's a little bit more on the technical side, but I want to try to make this as simplistic as possible for you all, so I don't have to try and teach every one of you HTML skills in 15 minutes. That's not the idea here, but rather the idea is to be able to recognize when there's a change in the language. So that's why we're doing this primarily. So just to give you a bit of a step back on this, is the reason that we're looking at this specifically within different documents and files within our LMS, which at our school is D2L. The reason we're doing this is because in introductory foreign language courses, it's not always a single language within one document or one file within the LMS. And as you can see from this assignment description here, we are jumping between English and Spanish quite regularly within this document, and throughout much of this content and activities, that's what's going to be happening. So the issue with that for screen readers is, for those of you that have dealt with foreign languages before, what happens is that then if we don't do these tagging steps, then the Spanish text here gets read with a English accent and pronunciation. So it just sounds like gibberish to someone using a screen reader. So the reason for what we're doing is to not only tell the screen reader what's happening within the entire document, but also looking piecemeal at what's happening in each line of text. Because if you know HTML at all, then you know that, for example, HTML documents will have a broad primary language set, but when you have a foreign language class like this, in D2L, I'm just gonna open up my editor and my toolbar so that you can see here how we have quite a few language changes. So typically, if this document were in Spanish, we would tell the browser to set the language to all Spanish. But because we have some transitions between English and Spanish, we need to differentiate those. And again, I brought up this example because there's quite a few transitions that happen, and there's typically within these courses, there's 3 instances where you'll need to make changes. So the first one I'm going to demonstrate to you here is on line 2, and we'll talk about more about the code in a minute, but on line 2 we have this carajo word that's intermixed within an English sentence, and then we have another snippet of Spanish text at the end of that line. So we can't tell the browser and the screen reader that that whole line is in Spanish because it's not. So so this is sort of the case 1 that I would say that you'll find in these documents, is that there's little words or snips or phrases in another language. And just to take it a little bit broader again, you know, this coding here will work for any language. So it's basically, you could have an introductory German class, you could have an introductory French class. It would just be a matter of tagging it with the right language codes, and we'll talk about that again in a second. And again, another example that you might have in your HTML text is where an entire and this one, you know, doesn't have it, but let's just say that line 5, that whole line were in Spanish, then we could tell our code that that list item was in Spanish, and we would use this lang attribute right here, this lang equals ES, to denote that, because that's saying that everything within this tag is in Spanish. And then the third example, if you will, is when you get later in a course like this, or you're in, say, a second semester course, where the primary language of the course or the documents becomes Spanish or French or German, then you would flip the script and you would have to do the primary language as Spanish, and then in that case, then if something turned to English, then you would use those tags, and that would be EN. So that's just sort of a broad stroke of this. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this one for right now, and then just tell you a little bit, or show you a little bit rather, about language attributes in HTML, because I think it's important to have this resource at your fingertips. So I'm a big fan of these W3C school tutorials. They're good for helping you learn little snippets of code, because again, I'm not trying to have you learn HTML in a day here. Just this is more about making language code accessible. So as you can see, this talks about the language attributes. And as you can see, there's some examples in here that are really nice. We'll just go to the next page real fast. So and then the other piece to that is the language codes. So in HTML, there's different codes for different languages, like country codes, if you were. So in English, for example, we have EN, and Spanish is Español, so it's ES. So again, we go back to our handy dandy W3C schools, and then here's a nice table of ISO codes for pretty much every country and region. If you want to get really fancy, you can even change dialects. So if you, and again, that's more for typesetting in a lot of instances, but if you're wanting to use a certain dialect of Spanish, then there's different tags for that. And this document will go over that for you. So, having this as a resource, I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat for all of you, so you can have that. So what so basically the other thing to talk about here, let me go ahead and oh, there's a chat. So here is the link to the country codes to pull these up, and then I can also go back to getting the HTML code just for the language attribute in general. One more back here. So yeah, so here's a little bit about the lang tag and how it's supported, or the lang attribute, and how it's supported in each browser. So go ahead and copy this. And then we'll go ahead and paste that in there. All right, so those are a few different, a couple different resources to check out as we go through this. So let me just move my chat out of the way. So the next piece of this to look at, if we go back to our HTML code here, is let me go back to my assignment that had the Spanish language in it. So we'll go back to this source code and look at a little bit more of the anatomy here of how we're using the tags and the lang attribute. So another example I wanted, well, first of all, the first example I want to show you is using the span tag. So again, if you are somewhat familiar with HTML, the span tag is just one of those tags where if you need to style or apply a specific attribute, a language, a color, inline styles to some piece of text within your document, then you can, in coding, what we do is we call this encapsulation. You would encapsulate the word or the phrases in this lang or the span tag. And then again, the lang attribute is here, and it's lang equals ES for Espanol and Spanish. And the nice thing about D2L is that its HTML editor is a lot more robust. It has color coding and highlights to help us see where we are in the code. So if I back that out and delete the lang attribute, I can actually start typing and press enter. And it's like a lot of code editors where I can type symbols and tags, and it'll give me nice autocomplete. So it knows that we're specifying a language here within this text. So as I'm typing, it can pull up all the different tags for me. But obviously it's worth going back to these code websites to make sure that you're using the right country code for your text. And as you can see, there is some delineation in English even between what we have in Great Britain and British English versus US English. So like I said, you can really get into the weeds, but we're looking at Spanish. So boom, there you go. You don't even have to memorize, like the quotes, and you just have to know the basics of, okay, I'm wanting to set the language here. And here's how we do that. So another example that I highlighted a little bit earlier is when we have something that's already within a different type of HTML tag, whether it's a list or a heading or paragraph, we can also apply the language attribute to that tag. So what do I mean by that? So we have this B tag here, which is one way to bold something in HTML. And because this whole phrase is in Spanish, we don't need to put a span tag in here, because the only thing that is in Spanish is that bolded item. So what we can do is, rather than putting extra code of a span tag inside the bold tag, which would work, but on the code side, we like to keep it plain and simple. So what we can do is, on this B tag, we just added our language attribute by starting to type it. It popped up, and then that way it's saying from this point, everything that's in bold is also in Spanish. And so we can see the closing /B. So that means that you'll be done with that code, that folding, and the language change ends there. So that means like we talked about a little bit earlier in the description, in the presentation, let's say this list item was Spanish. We could also use our language attribute here. Oops, and just hit the space bar, and then it does our little autocomplete for us. We get lang, and then we can do equals, and then start typing. Yes, it can come down here, and boom, there's my tag. Obviously, this text is in English, but again, anything that has tags around it in HTML that is in a different language, we don't have to go in and have two types of tags wrapped around that sentence or that paragraph. So that's a bit of an overview of this. I'm gonna go ahead and pause and give you all a chance to ask some questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or either type in the chat. You know, I'm low vision, so the hand raising is a little more, I might miss it, so feel free to speak up and ask your questions or comments in the chat. All right. So that's a little bit of introduction to this. The next thing I'm going to show you, and I'm just going to grab this code for simplicity's sake, is the other reason.
And Jennifer, before we get going, we did get one last second question in from Pamela. Just saying this would take so much time. Do you know if our colleges expect us to be able to do this?
And then which college are you at, Pamela?
FRCC.
Oh, at Front Range. Okay. Yeah, so that's something that we're working out at the system level. And depending on what sort of support you have, I don't know if Kay is in this group to speak to that, but I know at CCD we're trying to provide some professional development. Oh, Dana, I think, did you say you're doing this for the
Yeah, hi, it's Diana.
hi.
I'm doing this for the whole Spanish offering that we have through the early childhood education. I don't know, Pamela, in what department you are at. I'm the instructional designer for just that specific program because I'm contractor. I work full-time for CU Boulder.
And are you, so I know you're an instructional designer, and then Pamela, are you a part-time instructor, or what's your role at Front Range?
Hi, I'm a full-time faculty. I'm a lead faculty for online Spanish and Chinese, and I don't want to do code at all. I just am being honest with you. To me, I'm hoping that there's somewhere like this would be kind of nice to have an idea of what someone needs to do, but that someone isn't me.
Right. Oh, and yeah, and Kath, thanks for bringing up that point, you know, as we move to HSI. Yeah, that will be very important. And the other thing about this, and for those of you that are in our college system, and you are using D2L, are all of you familiar with the product idea exchange in the Brightspace community?
It's a great resource.
Yes, and the reason I asked that, and if if you aren't, I would strongly recommend getting involved in it, and you just have to sign up for the Brightspace community using your institutional email. And the reason I say that is because they have one tool called the product idea exchange. And through that, you can make suggestions. And one suggestion that me and a couple of the learning designers made at CCC Online was to, rather than going into code, you would have a language button in your WYSIWYG editor. So what that would mean is rather than having to weed through a bunch of HTML code, what you could do is click on the option. So say we wanted to, and I went a little too far here. Say we wanted to make these 2 words be Spanish, we would have either a language drop down on this toolbar or on the editor toolbar up here. Because when you click bold or italics or underline or color or some other attribute, all that's doing is applying that line or that code, that language code or that bold code or that underline code. All these buttons are doing is applying that code on the back end. So we propose that they that D2L add a language button on here. So to Pamela's point, you don't have to go in and weed through the HTML. You can just highlight stuff and say, oh, this is Spanish, click, or this is French, which again is still time consuming, but it's probably less of a headache than going into the code if you're not as comfortable. And then Robin, I saw something flash by. What was your question?
It's how do screen readers read foreign languages in Word documents or PDF files?
Okay, so that's a similar process as well, is you set up the language, as you set up the languages in either Word or PDF, but that you get a little more of that graphical interface to go into the menus and say this document has Spanish or French in it. So it's a little more intuitive, I want to say, than D2L, unfortunately. But again, those documents have their own challenges for making them accessible in other ways. So, but that is a good question. And I can definitely send you more resources. Yes, thank you, Kath. I'm glad you're on here and can provide more specifics too. So yeah, that's definitely true. And you know, I can send you some more detailed resources on that. I'm sure Kath can as well. And then Kath, in your role, since you're at Front Range, like what processes have you been doing?
Well, you know, we're glad to work with anyone to help remediate their own courses. We're glad to walk you through things. If you do have students with disabilities, we're glad to go ahead and create access to your documents, whether you want us to do the train the trainer model where we're training you how to do it, or if you need us to actually do the full work on it, as long as it's for a student with disabilities, we're glad to do that. You know, as we're moving forward, hopefully that's something our accessibility center, once we get one up and going, will be
Yes.
responsible to do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're willing to collaborate on that as well. And then getting back to where I was going when I copied all this, and thank you, Diana, for posting that resource. Appreciate that. Always like to share knowledge. So what I'm gonna do is go back into one of these modules here and just create a new file real quick as a demonstration. Because the other reason that we want to try to use this content as much as possible in D2L is because we have the built-in reader called Read Speaker, and some of the tools in that are able to go back and forth and change languages, but not consistently. So again, it's good to have your have your tag set properly, and that Read Speaker is really nice because it can it allows students, regardless of whether they're registered with their disability services office or not, or let's say they're on a long commute or something like that, they can go in and pull up the Read Speaker. And if you can just bear with me here, I'll show you how that would look from the, or how that would read from the student perspective. I'll just go ahead and paste this code in and save it. And another just little side plug here is in order to create accessibility, we also develop these templates based on the D2L accessible templates. We branded them and tried to choose fonts and colors that were high contrast. So that's another little thing that's going on here to make it more accessible. So we'll just save and close this. And then again, the other thing that we now have going on is use a panorama, which is a whole other tool that's nice. So if you're in the system, I recommend piloting it, and I know some of you are. But for the purposes of this Spanish demonstration, we'll go ahead and pull up Read Speaker.
You will now write your own short biography. 200 to 250 palabras. Primer.
Párrafo.
Introduction and your past.
El pretérito.
Name. When and where you were born. Significant life events. Important events in your life in chronological order. No descriptive details. Use expressions like
Primero, más tarde, cuando tenía número años. Luego, después, por número años.
etc.
Segundo párrafo.
Your current life. What are you doing now? El present.
Tercer párrafo.
Your future plans. Use expressions like voy plus infinitivo. Pienso plus infinitive.
So as you can see, I wanted to give you this example because I wanted you to hear what it sounded like when things were properly tagged and when they aren't. So as you can see, this one doesn't have the Spanish tags on it, and it read really badly with an English accent and pronunciation. as opposed to these words up here. So at the end of the day, this is why we're doing this. And then of course, screen readers like Read and Write Gold, JAWS, NVDA would also have that same change in pronunciation for students to utilize and hear. So that's why we're doing it. It's not just for the little diacritic marks or things like that. It's actually so the software will read things correctly in a variety of assistive technology. So the other thing I wanted to point out too, and we just organically saw a little bit of this, is anywhere that you have the WYSIWYG editor, or which stands for what you see is what you get. Anytime you have that tool, we can dive into the HTML and apply those tags. So so that applies to discussion descriptions, assignment descriptions, like web pages here. Like this is another example of where you can pull up web pages, and apologies. But here's another example where it switches between English and Spanish, and it's within the D2L HTML template as well.
Bienvenidos a la clase de Español 2. Paso 1. Crea un vídeo para presentarte a la clase. Contesta estas preguntas. ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿De dónde eres? ¿Cuál es tu pronombre personal? ¿Por qué estudias español? ¿Qué quieres compartir?
To share.
¿Con tus compañeros? Paso 2. Ve los vídeos de los compañeros.
And I wanted to bring up this example because, again, this is one of those cases I talked about where much more of the document is now in Spanish than English. So we actually, so this one is actually where we would use it, where it says to share. That's where we used the lang equals en, because within this entire sentence, the primary language was Spanish, but then we needed to quickly flip back to English. So that light switch, if you will, for languages goes both ways. So yeah, so that again, that is something that becomes probably less and less important as you get higher and higher in your language courses, because eventually, you know, it's going to be all written in Spanish or all written in English or all written in French. And then at that point, the student would probably just set their screen reader to that other language, set D2L to that language, and off they would go. So yeah, so these are some examples of that. And again, just to recap sort of the three cases, if you will, are when you have an entire document that's one language, you would just set that at the very top. And then the next case would be is if you have an entire line of code that is another language, and I'll bring up the code to show you that. Then you would use the lang attribute on that entire line of code. So as you can see, we set that entire line to Spanish. Versus having to chop up different sections of the text. And then the last case being where, let me see if I can find it. So yeah, so on line 9 of the code, where it switches to English for like 2 words to share, we actually applied the English US attribute to this chunk of text rather than the entire line, because then at that point it was implied that this was Spanish. So those are kind of your 3 basic cases. And again, to Pamela's point and other instructors, this can be very tedious, but that's where, you know, instructional designers like Diana and myself and Kath more on the accessibility side can assist with that. And then, you know, again, really upvoting this highlighting feature in the product idea exchange, so that you can just click on things and set them to Spanish just as you would bold something. So if my moderator could, I'll pause right here again.
Yep, and there was actually a question, Jennifer, going back to editing in the HTML there. The question was, wouldn't it be prudent to add a span tag around the entire section that is in Spanish instead of just each individual line?
Yes, and that's definitely an approach that you could do as well. And in that case, you know, you might want to use a div tag, for example, because that could encapsulate an entire section of text. So that's a great question, Aspen. So as you get into those higher level language classes, yes, you wouldn't have to go line by line. And then as you saw in this example, if there was a couple English words thrown in there, you would just tag those as English. So that answer that for you? Oh, great. Awesome. So we are getting near the end. So I just wanted to see, are there any other questions or thoughts or ideas to share in the chat? And like I said, feel free to speak up. And I love that we're all sharing ideas here and resources, because we can't know everything. So and thanks, Kath, for the resources. Yeah, so anybody feel free to speak up or post in the chat.
This is Robin at PCC, and you know, I've been through a lot of presentations between yesterday and today with using AI, and some people have talked about even using AI for scripting, and I kind of wonder if you couldn't experiment with using AI to go through and maybe do some of the coding for these lines.
Robin,
Yeah, that's a
great
great
idea.
idea.
Well, if somebody comes up with that formula, let me know.
I think if you asked it to go ahead and identify Spanish and wrap it in lang tags, write appropriate HTML5 code.
Yeah,
do that.
Yeah, that's basically, Cass, what I'm wanting D2L to do, is to add a button up here that can do that for you, at least as a first step, so that, you know, the first time adjunct instructor that's, you know, teaching 10 classes can focus on their teaching and not having to learn HTML. But yeah, I do like that, Robin. I think I'll do a little research on how you could automate scanning this document and then putting in the appropriate code.
Yeah, and Robin, I'll add to that. I actually do some of the editing for accessibility at Front Range in the design room or crew, and I actually use ChatGPT if I get into a jam where I'm just not getting the wording quite right. I'll throw it in there. The one thing I caution is just to make sure that there isn't any content in there that your institution wouldn't want you to be sharing. And usually you can kind of make that leave that part out. But it's also, if you're using D2L, it's worth mentioning to the AI that you're using Brightspace Editor, because it's a little bit different than just straight up HTML5. And it knows Brightspace and will adapt for that.
Good
Oh,
point.
that's
Thank you.
great.
Well, ChatGPT on the fly just forgot to put in lang tags, but I just asked it to do valid HTML. It was able to do a short paragraph in both languages, but it didn't go ahead and do anything other than repeat in both languages. I'm
Did you
asking,
add the code cat? Because I do that quite often. But I don't put the what we see in the pretty version of the editor. I actually take the code straight and I feed that to ChatGPT.
absolutely, that makes sense. If you already have the code, I just asked it to do it on the fly. When I asked
Got
it to use lang tags, it did. And it even put comments around it saying this is English content and this is Spanish content.
Oh, good. Yeah,
So
well,
on the fly, it did fine. I mean, it wasn't anything complicated, obviously.
yeah, and it's worth noting too that that these language tags were not invented for accessibility. Things rarely are, unfortunately. So originally the lang attributes were allowed. I can't talk at the end of today. Allowed you to bring in that full ISO extended character sets with the diacritics and various foreign language accent marks.
Right.
Right. So, and then accessibility, it just was a side effect of that, if you will. So, it's worth remembering that. Oh, cool. Thanks for posting the code. And then moderator person, what was your name again?
I go by Mouse.
Okay, cool. So, and then will we have access to the chat logs from these to everyone to share?
I believe so. The video itself is being recorded, so that will be available, and I'll check and double check to make sure that the chat log is saved as well.
Yeah, because that'd be great, because it's always good to share resources with everyone. Yeah, so looks like we have about another 3 minutes here. Were there any other thoughts or comments on this? Like I said, I would highly encourage all of you that use D2L to go in and give D2L those ideas of incorporating AI and buttons. So and then lastly, are there any native Canvas users in this group that have had similar or differing experiences in Canvas?
It's very similar, but as you know, the HTML editors in Canvas pages are kind of like the ones that you have in D2L for the description of modules, and some modules is not a full HTML editor like you have in the pages in D2L, so it's a little bit more restricted. But we have fun.
All right. So in those instances where you do have foreign languages, what are you doing in those cases for assignment descriptions?
I work with the Atlas department as a builder. So we take care of a lot of Spanish and Portuguese courses. So when that happens, I go in there. My instructors don't have to do it because I'm the instructional designer for them. So I go in there and take care of that for them. But like I said, many times Canvas don't like what I do and wipe my code out.
Oh,
Um,
no.
yeah, well, D2L is a little bit friendly in that aspect because I work in D2L for front range. That
Yeah, so you get to play in both playgrounds. That's kind of nice.
yes, I do.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, I started in Canvas and I found Canvas to be the friendlier tool. But maybe I just learned to get over my barriers there and
Well,
haven't
to be
as
fair,
much as
when it
D2.
comes to the end user, less tech savvy users, definitely Canvas is more friendly because is a little bit simpler. But when it comes to like, creating more complex stuff that might be more accessible to other users, D2L gives me the better tools. Um, I started actually with Blackboard. Jeez.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Do.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
started with Blackboard, then Moodle, then D2L, then Canvas. So yeah, I've been jumping all over the place.
Yeah, I bet I'm old enough to remember Blackboard too. Like, and even before that, WebCT, like show of
Oh
hands,
yeah,
how many-
WebCT, that one, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, that was painful.
yes, that was bad. So yeah, we've come a long way in LMSs.
All right. On that note, unless there are any more very pertinent questions, it is time to wrap it up. So are there any more pertinent questions? Okay. Thank all of you for attending the conference and helping out and being a contributor as well, Jennifer. There is a survey there for anyone that would be willing to take the time and just let us know your thoughts and help us to improve for the next one. It's just right there in the chat.
Thank you, Jennifer. This was awesome.
All right, thank you all for
Jennifer.
coming.